The morning was pale and quiet, like the sky had forgotten how to breathe. The air tasted of rain that had not yet fallen, and she stood in front of the mirror in her white dress, fingers trembling against the fabric that felt softer than her own heart. She could hear the faint echo of music somewhere down the hall, people laughing gently, the scent of flowers pressing around her like memories of what was about to come, and she smiled, though her eyes carried the weight of something unspoken. Her heart was full of names and prayers and the promise of forever whispered in silence. She thought of him waiting in another room, fixing his tie, his hands always steady, his eyes always sure, the man who made the world feel small and safe. She had imagined this day 1,000 times, every step, every vow, every tear that would fall like morning dew upon their promises. And yet the day felt strange, as if something invisible had placed its hand upon her shoulder, urging her to listen to something. Far away then came the phone call, the one that split the air and turned her body cold, someone shouting her name. Footsteps, the sound of the world shattering into 1,000 pieces. She did not remember running, only that she was suddenly outside. Rain now real and sharp on her face, her dress heavy, her breath short. The city turning into a blur of light and sirens, the colors bleeding together like grief on canvas. Her hands reached for the door of the hospital, her heart somewhere behind her, trapped in the moment before she knew everything would change. She ran through white halls that smelled of medicine and fear, her shoes echoing like broken promises, nurses moving fast, voices low. Someone said his name, someone said accident, and she felt her body lose shape. She became nothing but movement. She saw him through the glass, pale against the bed, tubes and wires like fragile vines holding him between this world and another. She wanted to scream, but her voice dissolved before it reached the air. She pressed her hand against the window and whispered his name like a secret she never meant to keep. Her mind raced back to the first time he had looked at her, the warmth in his eyes, the way he said her name as if he were tasting sunlight. She wanted to go back to that moment, to live there forever, where time had not yet learned to hurt. The doctor spoke, but she could not hear, only saw lips moving, faces shifting, the room spinning softly. She sat down in the corner, dress torn, hair falling from its pins. People moved around her, but she was not really there. She was inside the memory of his laughter, the sound of his shoes on their wooden floor, the way he said tomorrow, as if it were a promise that would never break. She realized now that love was not the wedding, the music, the rings. It was this, the waiting, the fear, the holding on even when the world collapses around you. She reached for his hand, cold and still, and whispered words that did not make sense, words that came from a place deeper than prayer. She told him she was here, that she was not going anywhere, that their vows would still be spoken, no matter what. And as the machines hummed softly in the corner and the rain began to fall harder against the window, she closed her eyes and made a promise to the quiet space between them, a promise that tomorrow would still come, even if it had to find them here in this room. Beneath the weight of everything, that almost waste night did not end it, only changed shape. The lights of the hospital glowed like tired stars, and she sat beside him, her hands folded around his. The beeping of the monitor became a kind of heartbeat for both of them. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, as if counting seconds could keep him here. The nurses moved gently around them, voices low, faces kind. She barely saw them. Her eyes were fixed on the man who had once promised her a lifetime, and now lay between breaths, suspended in the quiet that follows tragedy. She felt the weight of her dress heavy against the chair, the veil still pinned to her hair, a ghost of what was supposed to be. She whispered that she could not wait any longer, not for a ceremony, not for music, not for a church filled with faces. She needed to say her vows now, while he could still hear her through whatever wall separated his sleep from her trembling voice. Her mother tried to stop her, said there would be time, said he would wake, said she needed rest, but love does not understand time or reason, it only knows the pull of its own heart. So she stood, her dress trailing behind her through the sterile corridor, every step a decision, every tear a promise. She found the chaplain on duty, an old man with kind eyes who had seen too many endings and still believed in beginnings. He nodded without question, as if he had been waiting for her all along. Together, they returned to the room where machines whispered and rain tapped the window like a steady prayer. She leaned close to his ear and told him she was here, that the world had not gone anywhere, that he was still the center of her small universe. She brushed her thumb along his cheek, the stubble rough against her skin. She smiled through tears and said she wanted to Be his wife not tomorrow, not someday, but now in this moment before life decided what to do with them, she told the chaplain. To begin, his voice was low and steady, words moving like wind through the dim light. She repeated every line slowly, as if engraving them into the air for him to find when he woke. She said she would love him in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, for every breath and every silence. She promised to keep the world gentle for him, to guard his dreams, to hold his heart in hers, even when he could not hold hers back. Slipped the ring onto his finger, her hands shaking as though afraid the metal might melt from the heat of her tears. She kissed his forehead and rested her own against it, whispering that they were married now, that nothing could take that away, not even the night, not even the space between heartbeat and stillness. The chaplain closed his book softly and left them alone. She sat again beside the bed, fingers intertwined with his whispering. Pieces of the life they had planned, the home with the blue door, the mornings filled with coffee and sunlight, the laughter that would fill the small kitchen. She spoke them like a spell, trying to draw him back. Monitors kept their rhythm slow. Steady, the rain softened outside, dawn beginning to edge through the clouds. She could see faint color return to the sky, and for a moment, she believed it was returning to him too. She pressed her lips to his hand and said that tomorrow was waiting, and that she would stay until it arrived, no matter how long it took. Morning came gently, as if afraid to touch her. The first light, slipping through the blinds, fell across his face, and for a heartbeat she imagined he was only sleeping. She reached out, brushed her fingers against his hand. Still warm, still his, she whispered, "Good morning." Even though the words broke halfway through, she had not left his side through the night. The nurses had come and gone, the world had changed shift after shift, but she had remained anchored by love that refused to move. She had spoken to him about everything, the seasons they had yet to see, the ocean. He had promised to take her to the small garden behind their home that waited quietly for laughter to return, and though his eyes stayed closed, she believed that somewhere in the place between dreams and memory he was listening. Doctors came, their faces gentle, their words careful and slow. She only nodded as they spoke, because none of their sentences could explain the shape of love that filled the room. She looked at the machines, the soft rise and fall of numbers, the green glow that measured hope. She felt the weight of the ring on his finger, and the matching one on hers, a fragile circle that now held the universe together. She leaned close and whispered the vows again, each word a bridge across silence. She told him she was his wife, and that she would keep walking beside him through every shadow, through every soundless hour, until he found his way back, or until the world ended, whichever came first. As the days stretched thin, she opened the small notebook she carried, a journal they had started together, pages filled with plans and sketches of the life they wanted. She read the words aloud, and the room seemed to listen. She read about the road trips they had dreamed of, about the stray dog he wanted to rescue, about the songs they would sing out of tune. She laughed softly through tears and said she would do all of it for both of them if she had to, but she hoped he would still come with her. She hoped he would wake and see the sunlight again. Hours passed slow and kind. The rain had stopped and the air outside smelled clean. A nurse entered quietly to check the machines and paused, seeing her reading the vows again, her voice barely above a breath. The nurse turned away, her own eyes wet, because there was something sacred in the sound of love refusing to end. Then came the stillness, not loud, not sudden, but deep, like the ocean when it forgets to move. She felt it before she heard the change. Her heart knew it in the space between two beeps. She lifted her head and looked at him, and for a long moment she believed he was waking, because his face looked peaceful, softer than it had all night. But the light in the room had shifted, the rhythm had gone, and she realized that this was the part of the story where time itself bowed its head. She did not cry at first. She simply placed her forehead against his hand and whispered thank you over and over, as if gratitude could hold him a little longer. She thanked him for loving her, for choosing her, for teaching her how to see beauty even in pain. She told him he could rest now, that she would carry the vows for both of them. She stayed like that until the room felt heavy with silence, until the nurses came and spoke to her gently, until the world outside reminded her that morning had fully arrived. Later, when she stepped out of the hospital, her dress no longer white but marked with the memory of every tear, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The light wrapped around her, and she closed her eyes, breathing it in. She did not feel empty. She felt full of everything they had shared. She realized that vows do not end where breath does. They live on in the spaces left behind in the corners of every sunrise, in the echo of every promise kept. She walked slowly toward the parking lot, holding the small notebook close to her chest, the veil fluttering softly in the wind. She looked once at the sky and whispered that she would see him again. Not in dreams, but in every moment that reminded her of love unbroken. She turned and began to walk the road ahead, long and uncertain, yet somehow gentle, because he was still with her in every step, invisible but real as the air itself. And somewhere in the hush between the heartbeats of the world, she thought she heard him say, "I do."